I'm working out on a Saturday and then I'm going to dinner with my husband. So I have been reading this book. It's called Uninvited. It has a really good point, and that is that we're always invited. We're always invited into God's kingdom. He always loves us, and we're always invited with the people who love us, even though sometimes we think that we're not. And the way to live life is to always know that you are invited. And there's a scripture that I've been working out too. So let's take a lunge position, a runner's lunge position with space between the feet, and then drop this back heel down and then step it forward a foot. Make sure that toe is in a diagonal. I've already warmed up today, so if you haven't warmed up, stop this video right now and go take a 10-minute walk and then come back. This is Isaiah 61 that I want to read to you today, and it is a prophecy made in the Old Testament by Isaiah, my favorite prophet. Then go ahead and just start letting this top hip drop and breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. And Isaiah prophesied of a Messiah that would come, who would comfort us and help us and heal the brokenhearted and bind all our wounds. And Jesus actually read this scripture in the synagogue and said he had fulfilled that scripture. Now everybody works at their own pace, so you may be up here, but I'm going to work where I need to work, and you work where you need to work. So I'm bearing the weight of the body on my thigh, and then raising the arm. And I like to keep my arm in front of the plane of my body, because it helps me keep my shoulder down and breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. And as soon as we're done with this pose, I'll read you the scripture. If you're opening up, you can bring it down further, but you certainly don't have to. This is the hip that I hurt in karate, so I'm going to step it out a little bit more and make sure that that toe is pointing diagonally forward. And add a stretch, keeping the arm in the diagonal with the leg. And breathing, keeping the head in line with the spine. Sometimes I tend to do this, and you want to keep that head in line with the spine. 2 more breath cycles. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Great job. Let's come down into a runner's lunge. Now your runner's lunge needs to fit you, so it can be up here. I'm going to do a runner's lunge that fits me. So my runner's lunge is right here. And I'm going to start reading with this scripture. Isaiah 61. It's a powerhouse of promises that Jesus has fulfilled for you and for me. So let's just kind of feast on this as you stretch. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, Jesus says, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. Let's just think about that. To proclaim good news to the poor. I like to just stretch and think about verses, and I find that it quiets me and that I come to the realization of new things about the scripture. Like today, I'm thinking the poor means the people who are not noticed, the ones who think they're insignificant, the ones who aren't in the public eye and who are overlooked by everybody, by people. And it says that Jesus has come to proclaim good news to those of us who feel insignificant or poor in spirit. Go ahead and come back into a hamstring stretch. And you can do this standing with a straight back. always a straight back, or you can come down to your knee if it's more comfortable. And the secret to the hamstring stretch is keeping the back straight and the core engaged and the hips square. Because if you round your back, you've lost the stretch. If you twist, you've lost your stretch. And if you let your hips get unsquare, you've lost your stretch. So square hips, core engaged, straight back. And again, your stretch may be here. I'm going to do the stretch that fits me, and you do the stretch that fits you. So the poor might also be those who are poor in spirit. And I'm going to pull this toe back now and stretch the cat as well. I feel poor a lot of the time, not in like worldly things, but poor in the sense of the presence of Jesus, because there's nothing that makes me feel like life is rich and full like the presence of Jesus. So I think that might be too what is meant by this verse. And you can go ahead and take the calf out of the stretch, then you know it's a pure ham stretch. So I'm going to read it again. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. And I'll read the next verse. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted. Oh, I'm going to stop right there. That's just too good. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted. Go ahead and release this stretch and come right down to your hip. And this front leg is in a 90-degree angle, and this back leg is in a 90-degree angle. So 90 degrees is that, right? So we're going to push this leg back and come over to the forearm so this hip is lifted. We're going to stretch over this front knee at a diagonal. What a good position to read this next part. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted and to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners. So let's think about that. I'm going to advance the stretch, but you don't have to. Pull the leg in and go over the back knee, but I'm staying lifted. I'm not sinking into the stretch. So many times we think freedom is doing what we want to. That's what I'm thinking right now, but real freedom is doing the will of Jesus. That's what brings us real freedom. We think it's the opposite, doing what we want, but it's really not. He proclaims freedom for the captives. Let's return to that first stretch that we did before, and I'll show you the next part. Simply raise up and put a fist in the hip. I'm going to turn so you can see this angle here. You want to see a C in the stretch. A C will help you get this stretch here. And breathe. I'm going to advance the stretch, but again, you don't have to. Everybody needs to work out at a place where they're comfortable, and I've been exercising since I was like 14, so we all need to just do what is comfortable for us. So everybody needs to stretch where they're comfortable stretching. And it's funny, I teach exercise classes, and sometimes, you know, we'll have people in the same class who need gentle stretches and some who need more advanced stretches. So we want to make sure everybody is feeling honored being themselves. And our instructors know this one, and this is the advanced version of that stretch. It feels great to those who have worked up to it. I don't feel bad if you didn't. So just work out where you're comfortable and breathe. we're going to do that whole sequence on the other side. So first thing we're going to do is side saddle around and come into a forward bend, hands on the thighs, and take a forward bend that is comfortable for you with a straight back. The weight is in the balls of the feet, and that takes the pressure off of the attachment of the hamstring. You can have the feet farther apart for more stability, closer in, if that helps. You want to keep the back straight as always. And round up, and we'll do that whole sequence on the other side. So it was lunge, like a runner's lunge, except dropping the heel and stepping forward, making sure the knee doesn't go beyond the ankle, and then open the hips. Oh, it's hot in here, a little bit. And then adjust. This back foot needs to be in a diagonal. And then you hinge. And breathe. We're going to hold it for 7 breath cycles. And allow your muscles to release a little bit at a time. You can add a further stretch if you want to. Rolling that top shoulder back. Thinking about that scripture. I'm coming to the runner's lunge. Great job. I'm going to grab my book here as I go into the runner's lunge. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives, and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God. And as I'm thinking about that today, so it's a year of favor and a day of vengeance. So to me that says that God's favor is longer than His vengeance is. But that there is an appointed time, and that He's in charge of all the times of human history, days and years. I never thought about that before. So that's why I like to think about scripture, because every single time, even though I've read it a lot of times, I still get something new out of it. Go ahead and come back to the hamstring stretch. And this is the pure hamstring stretch, so the back is straight, hips are square, and the toe is down. I'm going to read the next part. To comfort all who mourn, and to provide for those who grieve in Zion, bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes. A crown of beauty instead of ashes. The oil of joy instead of mourning, and the mantle of praise instead of a spirit of despair. Let's bring that forward foot back. Now you're feeling a stretch of the calf and the hamstring. And breathe, allowing the muscles to release. So this was Jesus' life verse. This was his mission on earth. And then when he left, he gave us his mission. Go ahead and put that toe down again for a pure stretch. So I'm going to read it next, and this time let's apply it to ourselves, because now it's our mission. It's not that we do it, it's that Jesus will do it through us. Well, let's take that next stretch, which is simply seated on the hip, 90 degree in front, 90 degree in back, down on forearm, this hip raised, and stretching on the forward knee at a diagonal. And you're lifting this knee while you're stretching forward. And this time I'm going to read it, and let's apply it to ourselves as our life mission. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me. Oh, on me. Because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. Wow, that's just too heavy to keep going. Anointed us to preach good news to those who are invisible, and to those who are poor in spirit, who need Jesus. I'm going to advance this stretch, but you don't have to. Read the next part. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for captives, and release from darkness for the prisoners. And that's our job now. He does it through us. I'm going to rewind to where you were before. And from here, to go to the next pose, you simply come up, create that C curve, pushing the hip forward. It's a great hip opening stretch. Makes your back flexible, releases all these perfectionist muscles here in the quads, releases a lot of emotions while you're stretching. Breathe. And I'm going to keep progressing this, but you can stay right here while I read the rest. To proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. And what I'm doing is pushing and pulling here and lifting up. And let's think about how we can help maybe somebody and help them to realize that Jesus gives us the oil of joy instead of the garment of despair, the garment of praise instead of the garment of despair, and beauty for ashes. And breathe. And release. And let's end with hamstring stretch. I'm going to read through this whole scripture and just come forward with a straight back. Stop wherever you need to for the hamstring stretch. If you want to bring the calves into it, you pull the feet back. I'm going to do a pure hamstring. So, the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives, and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them the crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and the garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. Have a great day today, and we're going to end with rock posture. Just roll down and relax with the shoulder blades together, and allow the feet to fall open, and just go ahead and think about that scripture today and how that's Jesus' life mission and it's also ours.